I am Wilma, 58 years old. For 19 years, my son Daniel and I were inseparable after my husband died. We had weekly dinners, daily texts. Then he met Jessica. Suddenly I became an inconvenience. Yesterday I received a text that shattered my world. Stop calling me. Jessica is my family now. So I made the hardest call of my life, to the bank. If you are watching this story, please let me know where you are viewing from, and hit like and subscribe. Before we dive into how a mother's love sometimes requires the hardest choices. The day my husband Robert died from pancreatic cancer, Daniel was only 8 years old. I remember his small hand in mine at the funeral, his confused eyes looking up at me, asking when Daddy was coming back. That moment solidified my determination to be both mother and father to him, to create a life where he would never lack for anything. I was 39 then, working as a financial analyst for a major firm in Boston. While grieving, I also had to navigate single parenthood and the pressure of being the sole provider. Robert had life insurance, thankfully, which I immediately placed into a trust fund for Daniel's future education and security. I wanted him to have opportunities to never worry about money the way I had, growing up in a struggling middle-class household in rural Pennsylvania. During those early years, Daniel and I formed an unbreakable bond. Every evening, I would help him with homework before reading him a story. Weekends were sacred, our special museum trips, bike rides along the Charles River, or movie marathons with homemade popcorn. I made sure to attend every school play science fair and parent-teacher conference, often rearranging important work meetings to be present for him. When Daniel turned 12, I took a huge risk and started my own financial consulting firm. The first 2 years were brutal, long hours, constant stress, and the fear of failure hanging over me. But Daniel became my little cheerleader, leaving encouraging sticky notes on my laptop and bringing me coffee on weekend mornings when I was reviewing contracts. We were a team facing life's challenges together. By the time he reached high school, my business had flourished beyond my wildest expectations. I had a team of 15 employees, an office overlooking the Boston Harbor, and a reputation as one of the sharpest financial minds in the industry. I was finally able to provide Daniel with everything I thought a growing boy needed: a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood, private school education, summer camps, and vacations. Daniel was naturally intelligent, but not particularly driven. He needed structure and guidance to achieve his potential. I hired tutors when necessary and spent countless hours helping him prepare college applications. Some might say I was over-involved, but I saw it as investing in his future the way any dedicated parent would. When he was accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, I felt like our hard work had paid off. The trust fund would cover the remainder of his education expenses, and he could graduate debt-free. I remember the day we toured the campus together, his eyes wide with excitement and a touch of nervousness. I reassured him that college would be the adventure of a lifetime, but that I would always be just across town if he needed me. Throughout his college years, we maintained our close relationship. Sunday dinners became our tradition, a time to catch up on his classes and campus life. I enjoyed hearing about his marketing courses and his growing interest in digital advertising. Daniel had always been creative, and it seemed he had found his professional calling. After graduation, I used my network to help him secure an entry-level position at a reputable marketing firm. Some might call it nepotism, but I saw it as using every available resource to help my child succeed. Isn't that what parents are supposed to do, though? The job came with a modest salary, but I supplemented his income with a monthly allowance from the trust so he could afford a nice apartment and professional wardrobe. Everything was going according to plan until last spring, when Daniel mentioned a new colleague named Jessica. At first, I was delighted. Daniel had dated occasionally, but never seemed serious about anyone. At 27, I thought it might be good for him to find a partner, someone to share his life with beyond his old mother. I remember asking to see a photo of this Jessica. He showed me her LinkedIn profile picture, a striking woman with perfectly styled dark hair and an ambitious smile. Something about her made me uneasy, but I dismissed it as maternal protectiveness. When Daniel mentioned she was 32 and had previously worked at several prestigious agencies, I told myself her experience could be good for his career. Little did I know that Jessica would become the wedge that would drive my son and me apart, leading to the most painful decision I would ever have to make as a mother. I first noticed the change in our relationship when Daniel canceled our monthly dinner at Salvatore's, our favorite Italian restaurant, where we had celebrated every milestone since his high school graduation. His text was brief. "Can't make it tonight. Work deadline. We'll reschedule." I thought nothing of it at the time. Work commitments happen. But when he canceled the following month with an equally vague excuse, I began to worry. Our daily text exchanges dwindled to every few days, then once a week. His responses became increasingly short and perfunctory. "Fine. Busy." Later, when I called, the conversations felt rushed, with Daniel frequently claiming he was just heading into a meeting or about to meet friends. I tried not to take it personally. After all, he was a young professional, building his career and social life. But the mother's intuition that had guided me through 19 years of parenting was sending warning signals I couldn't ignore. After 6 weeks of this distancing pattern, I decided to surprise him with lunch at his office. I picked up sandwiches from his favorite deli and arrived at the sleek downtown building where his marketing firm occupied 3 floors. The receptionist, who recognized me from previous visits, smiled warmly and directed me to Daniel's department. I found him hunched over his computer, his brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, watching him work with such focus reminded me of his father, and my heart swelled with pride. Then he looked up and saw me. Instead of the pleased surprise I expected, his face registered something closer to alarm. "Mom, what are you doing here?" He quickly closed whatever he was working on and stood up, glancing nervously around the open-plan office. "I brought lunch," I said, holding up the bag of sandwiches. "Thought we could catch up since dinner hasn't worked out lately." Before he could respond, a woman approached his desk. She was even more stunning in person than her LinkedIn photo had suggested. Tall, immaculately dressed in a designer suit with an air of confident authority that seemed to command the space around her. "Daniel, we need to finalize the Westbrook presentation before—" She stopped noticing me. Daniel's posture changed immediately, straightening as he placed his hand on the small of her back. "Jessica, this is my mother, Wilma. Mom, this is Jessica Bennett, our new digital strategy director, and my girlfriend." The word girlfriend hung in the air between us. This was clearly more than a casual workplace romance. Jessica's smile didn't reach her eyes as she extended a perfectly manicured hand. "So nice to finally meet you. Daniel speaks of you often," she said, though her tone suggested those conversations weren't entirely positive. We ended up having an awkward lunch in the building's cafeteria. Jessica dominated the conversation with tales of her previous work at top agencies in New York and Los Angeles, dropping names of celebrities and luxury brands she had represented. Throughout the lunch, she kept her hand possessively on Daniel's arm, occasionally interrupting when I asked him personal questions. "Daniel's been absolutely instrumental in the Westbrook campaign," she said when I inquired about his current projects. "In fact, I've recommended him for a team lead position." It was the first I'd heard of any potential promotion, and from Daniel's surprised expression, it might have been news to him as well. As we were finishing, Jessica excused herself to take a call. The moment she was out of earshot, I asked, "She seems accomplished. How long have you two been seeing each other?" "About 2 months," Daniel replied, fidgeting with his napkin. "She's amazing, Mom. She's helping me see my potential." Something about the rehearsed quality of that phrase unsettled me. "I'm glad," I said carefully. "She seems very invested in your career." "That's not all," he said, lowering his voice. "We're actually looking at apartments together. Something nicer in Beacon Hill." Beacon Hill was one of Boston's most expensive neighborhoods, well beyond what an entry-level marketing professional could afford. I kept my expression neutral, but my financial advisor brain was already calculating the numbers. They didn't add up. "That's a pricey area, honey. Are you sure that's within your budget?" His face clouded. "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. I can handle my own finances." "Of course," I backpedaled. "I just want to make sure you're not stretching yourself too thin." Jessica returned before he could respond effectively, ending our private conversation. As they walked me to the elevator, she mentioned casually, "We should all have dinner soon. I'd love to see your home, Wilma. Daniel says your art collection is quite impressive." The comment struck me as odd. I had a few modest pieces I'd collected over the years, nothing that qualified as an impressive collection. What exactly had Daniel been telling her about me and my assets? That evening, I received a call from my old friend, Marion, who worked at a competing marketing agency. "Wilma, I heard Daniel is dating Jessica Bennett. Is that true?" When I confirmed, her voice dropped to a concerned whisper. "Be careful. She has a reputation in the industry. 2 years ago, she was engaged to Thomas Griffith, the heir to Griffith Publishing. The engagement ended abruptly, and suddenly, she had a brand new car and condo. Before that, there was a venture capitalist from San Francisco. Same pattern." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. "I'm saying she has a type, men with money or access to it. And from what I hear, she's not above helping herself to it." As I hung up, I noticed a credit card statement on my desk that had arrived earlier that day. I had added Daniel as an authorized user years ago for emergencies. Scanning the recent charges, my stomach dropped. A $5,000 purchase at a luxury watch store, $3,000 at a designer boutique, dinner at restaurants where appetizers cost more than what most people spend on an entire meal. This wasn't my son's typical spending pattern. Something was very wrong, and Jessica Bennett was somehow at the center of it. The annual Mother's Day brunch had been our tradition since Daniel was in elementary school. Even during his college years, when he lived in a dormitory across town, he had always made it a priority. This year, I made reservations at the Four Seasons, splurging on the champagne package. I arrived 15 minutes early, as usual, selecting a table with a beautiful view of the public garden. 30 minutes after our agreed time, Daniel still hadn't arrived. I had called twice, receiving no answer. Just as I was considering leaving, they finally appeared. "Sorry we're late," Daniel mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. Traffic was bad. Jessica didn't bother with excuses. Instead, she thrust her left hand forward, a massive diamond glittering on her ring finger. "We have news. Daniel proposed last night." I nearly dropped my water glass. My son had been dating this woman for barely 3 months, and now they were engaged, and he hadn't even called to tell me before showing up with her. Congratulations, I managed to say, trying to process this shocking development. This is certainly unexpected. Jessica laughed a tinkling sound that didn't match the calculating look in her eyes. When you know, you know. Right, babe, Daniel nodded, but I noticed he seemed subdued, almost nervous. Not the demeanor of a man excitedly announcing his engagement. When are you thinking of having the wedding? I asked. As soon as possible, Jessica answered, before Daniel could open his mouth. We're thinking next month, actually. Just something small and intimate. No need for a long engagement when you're sure. Next month. I couldn't hide my surprise. But that's so soon. Don't you want time to plan properly? And what about Daniel's cousins in California? His Aunt Susan would be heartbroken to miss his wedding. Jessica's smile tightened. Like I said, something small. Just immediate family. We don't need a big production. Throughout brunch, I tried multiple times to engage Daniel in conversation about their plans, but Jessica intercepted every question. She had already selected the venue, an exclusive boat club on the harbor, decided they would honeymoon in the Maldives, in the most expensive overwater bungalows, and chosen the photographer, a celebrity wedding specialist who charged 5 figures. When the check came, Daniel reached for it, another departure from our tradition, where I always treated on Mother's Day. I noticed his new platinum credit card, the kind with astronomical spending limits and strict income requirements. How had he qualified for that on his junior marketing salary? After Jessica excused herself to the restroom, I finally had a moment alone with my son. Daniel, honey, is everything okay? This all seems very rushed. His eyes darted around nervously. It's fine, Mom. Jessica knows what she wants. She's helping me be more decisive. But marriage is a huge decision. You've only known her a few months. There's no harm in a longer engagement to really be sure. His face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. You don't understand her. You're not even trying to. Jessica says you're being controlling. The words felt like a slap. Controlling, Daniel, I'm concerned. This isn't like you, the spending the rush to marry. I just want you to be sure. What I'm sure of is that you've always made my decisions for me. Jessica is helping me stand on my own feet. Before I could respond, Jessica returned, effectively ending our conversation. As they prepared to leave, she said casually, "Oh, Wilma, we wanted to talk to you about Daniel's trust fund. We'd like to access it early for a down payment on a house in Brookline. Nothing extravagant, just a starter home for our family." The pieces, suddenly, clicked into place. I had established the trust, with strict conditions. It would fully mature when Daniel turned 30, or earlier, only for education, medical emergencies, or a starter home with financial counseling. It currently held over $2 million between Robert's life insurance and prudent investments over the years. That's something we'd need to discuss with the trust administrators, I said carefully. There are specific conditions for early disbursements. But you're the primary trustee, Jessica pointed out, revealing she knew more about the trust structure than I had ever discussed with her. Surely you can authorize it. We'll need to set up a proper meeting with the financial advisors, I insisted. These things have legal processes. As they left, Daniel barely hugged me goodbye, a stark contrast to his usual warm embraces. Over his shoulder, I caught Jessica's expression, a smirk that chilled me to the bone. That afternoon, I received a concerning call from my bank. Someone had attempted to access information about the trust using Daniel's identification, but without the proper authentication protocols. When questioned, they had become hostile and hung up. The following week, my friend in the marketing industry forwarded me an email thread she had received accidentally. It contained messages between Jessica and a real estate agent discussing properties in the $3 to $4 million range, well beyond what any starter home should cost. One message specifically mentioned accessing trust fund money and convincing the mother. I tried calling Daniel to discuss these developments, but he didn't answer. When I texted my concerns about the unauthorized attempt to access the trust information, his response was blistering. "Stop monitoring my finances. I'm not a child. Jessica and I are building a life together, and we need a proper home. If you won't help us, we'll find another way." That same day, I received an anonymous email with links to news articles about Jessica's previous relationships. One detailed her engagement to the publishing heir, Thomas Griffith, which ended abruptly amid rumors of financial impropriety. Another mentioned a lawsuit filed by a former boyfriend, claiming she had fraudulently charged over $100,000 to his business accounts. The woman who was about to marry my son in less than a month was not who she claimed to be, and my son was too infatuated or manipulated to see it. I requested an urgent meeting with Daniel and Jessica to discuss wedding plans and financial arrangements. After several ignored calls, Daniel finally agreed to meet at my home on a Sunday afternoon. I spent the morning preparing Daniel's favorite meal, slow-cooked pot roast with root vegetables, and made his preferred chocolate cake for dessert. I wanted to create an atmosphere of warmth and family, hoping it might break through whatever spell Jessica seemed to have cast over him. They arrived an hour late. Jessica immediately commented on my quaint decor and charming little house, though my home was a well-appointed colonial on 2 acres in an exclusive suburb. Her condescension was palpable, but I maintained my composure. Over dinner, I tried to steer the conversation toward practical wedding matters. "Have you considered a prenuptial agreement? It's standard practice these days, especially with assets like the trust involved." Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. "A prenup? That suggests a lack of commitment. Don't you trust me with your son, Wilma?" "It's not about trust," I explained calmly. "It's about protecting both parties. Daniel has his future inheritance to consider, and I'm sure you have assets of your own to protect as well." Her laugh had an edge to it. "My most valuable asset is my ability to see Daniel's true potential, unlike some people who've kept him dependent." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Speaking of the trust, Jessica continued, cutting a small piece of pot roast. "We've been discussing our financial future. We believe it makes sense for Daniel to take control of his inheritance now, rather than waiting until he's 30. He's a grown man about to start a family." I maintained my composure. The trust was structured very specifically by financial and legal experts. There are tax implications and penalties for early withdrawal without meeting certain conditions. "Conditions you control," Jessica said sharply. "Let's be honest here, Wilma. You've used that money to keep Daniel under your thumb, making him check in for his allowance, monitoring his spending. It's infantilizing." "That's not true," I protested, looking at Daniel. "The trust is for your future, to ensure security. Your father wanted that for you." "Don't bring Dad into this." Daniel finally spoke, his voice hard. "You've always used his memory to control me." His words felt like a physical blow. I had never used Robert's memory as a manipulation tactic. The trust was genuinely created out of love and concern for Daniel's future. "If you don't agree to release the funds," Jessica said, leaning forward with a threatening posture, "we might need to reconsider your role in our lives going forward, including at the wedding." The implied ultimatum hung in the air. Either I give them access to the money, or I would be cut out of my only child's life. I think you should leave, I said, quietly, standing up. This conversation isn't productive right now. We're all too emotional. Jessica smirked and grabbed her designer bag. Come on, Daniel. I told you this would be a waste of time. Daniel hesitated, looking at the untouched chocolate cake on the counter. For a moment, I saw a flicker of my real son, the boy who loved my baking and our Sunday dinners. Then Jessica took his arm, and his expression hardened again. After they left, I sat alone at my dining table, the remains of our meal growing cold. My phone pinged with a notification from my banking app. To my horror, I discovered Daniel had attempted to take out a $50,000 personal loan using our shared address for verification. The loan had been denied due to existing debt already, a red flag that made my stomach drop. With trembling hands, I logged into the monitoring service I had set up years ago to protect Daniel from identity theft. After a university data breach, the credit report revealed multiple recently opened credit cards, all carrying near maximum balances, a loan from a high-interest lender, a lease on a luxury car that cost more per month than his rent. My son was drowning in debt, and I hadn't even known. At midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Daniel. You've always tried to control my life. Jessica says you're jealous because you're alone. Stop interfering or you'll lose me forever. The message was so unlike my kind, considerate son that tears sprang to my eyes. This was Jessica's influence. Those weren't even his words. I could almost hear her dictating the message to him. The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope containing legal documents that had been filed with the trust administrators. Daniel was formally requesting full control of the trust, claiming he was getting married and purchasing a home. What shocked me most was that the documents included a consent form with what appeared to be my signature forged at the bottom. Someone had attempted to falsify my approval. Given Jessica's history, I had little doubt who was behind it. My fears were confirmed when I received a call from Patricia, a former colleague who now worked at the firm where Jessica had been employed before joining Daniel's company. Wilma, I heard through the grapevine that your son is engaged to Jessica Bennett. I felt I had to warn you she was let go from our agency for ethical concerns. She convinced one of our wealthy clients to invest in a special project that turned out to be her personal shopping spree. The client was too embarrassed to press charges, but we had to let her go immediately. She's done this before. As I was processing this information, a final devastating text came through from Daniel. Stop calling me. Jessica is my family now. The words shattered what remained of my heart. My son, my only child, the center of my world since the day he was born, was rejecting me in favor of a woman who was clearly manipulating him for financial gain. I had never felt so helpless, so utterly defeated. But as I sat, surrounded by evidence of Jessica's deception and Daniel's financial ruin, something inside me hardened. I hadn't built a successful business and raised a son alone by giving up when things got difficult. If Jessica thought I would step aside while she destroyed my son's future, she had gravely underestimated a mother's determination. I spent the night in a fog of disbelief and heartbreak, alternating between tears and moments of fierce resolve. By morning, I knew I needed professional help to navigate this situation. I called Andrew Peters, my attorney, for both personal and business matters for the past 15 years. This is serious, Wilma, Andrew said after I had laid out the situation, including the forged documents and mounting evidence of Jessica's pattern of financial exploitation. The attempted fraud against the trust alone is criminal. We need to act quickly before more damage is done. I nodded, clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline. What are my options? I can't let her drain him financially, but I also don't want to lose my son entirely. Andrew's expression was grave. First, we need to secure the trust. As primary trustee, you have the authority to place a temporary freeze on disbursements if you believe the beneficiary is under duress or being manipulated. It's a protective measure built into most trust structures. Will that hold up legally? I asked. With the evidence you've gathered, absolutely. The forged documents alone justify immediate protective action. Then there's the pattern of behavior Jessica has displayed with previous partners. Next, I met with Harold Winters, the trust manager at my bank. He reviewed the suspicious activity and the documentation I had collected. Mrs. Marshall, this is one of the most blatant attempts at trust fund manipulation I've seen in my 30 years in banking, Harold said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the forged signature. The fact that they attempted to falsify your authorization shows clear intent to circumvent proper procedures. What can we do to protect the assets? I asked. We can immediately freeze the trust pending a review by our legal department. This is exactly why the trust was structured with safeguards your late husband was wise to insist on them. The mention of Robert brought a lump to my throat. He had been so careful about the trust structure, insisting on protections I hadn't fully understood at the time. He always said the money was meant to be a safety net, not a hammock, I recalled softly. Harold nodded. A wise perspective. We'll also need to address the unauthorized access attempt. Our security team has the records of the call and the ID information provided. While the banking proceedings were underway, I hired a licensed private investigator to compile a comprehensive background report on Jessica. What he uncovered was even worse than I had feared. Jessica Bennett had legally changed her name 5 years ago. She had previously been Jessica Winters, with a history of fraud charges that had been settled out of court. She had been engaged 3 times in the past 7 years, each time to wealthy men significantly younger than herself. Each relationship had followed the same pattern: a whirlwind romance, quick engagement, attempts to access funds, and then a sudden end once money changed hands or the victim realized what was happening. The investigator had located 2 of her previous victims, including Thomas Griffith, who provided a written statement about his experience. The similarities to Daniel's situation were chilling: the isolation from family and friends, the rush toward marriage, the excessive spending, and the constant pressure to access family money. Armed with this information, I faced the most difficult decision of my life: how to proceed without pushing Daniel further away. If I confronted him directly with this evidence, Jessica's influence might cause him to reject it entirely. But if I did nothing, he would be financially ruined, possibly for decades to come. After consulting with both legal and psychological experts, I made my decision. I would freeze the trust immediately to prevent any fraudulent access, document everything meticulously for potential legal proceedings, and attempt one more conversation with Daniel alone. The meeting with the trust board was somber. 3 financial advisors, Harold and Andrew, reviewed all the evidence I had gathered. Based on the documentation presented and the clear risk to the beneficiary's financial security, do we have a motion to temporarily freeze the Marshall Family Trust? Asked Harold, the senior trustee. The vote was unanimous. The trust would be frozen for 90 days, with potential extension pending further review. No withdrawals, no changes to the terms, complete protection of the assets. As I signed the official documents authorizing the freeze, my hand trembled slightly. This wasn't how I had envisioned using my authority as trustee. The power had been granted to me to protect Daniel's interests, and that was exactly what I was doing, even if it would cause him pain in the short term. "Are you certain you want to proceed with this, Mrs. Marshall?" Harold asked, gently, sensing my hesitation. I thought of Daniel as a little boy, looking up at me with complete trust. I thought of the promises I had made to Robert as he lay dying, that I would always protect our son. I thought of the evidence of Jessica's predatory history and Daniel's mounting debt under her influence. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm certain." That evening, I drafted an email to Daniel. I kept it factual and unemotional, explaining that irregularities had been detected in relation to the trust, including forged documents and unauthorized access attempts. As a result, a standard security freeze had been implemented by the trust board. I included contact information for the bank's trust department if he wanted to discuss the situation through official channels. I didn't mention Jessica. I didn't accuse him of anything. I simply stated facts and reiterated that I loved him and was available whenever he wanted to talk. After sending the email, I sat in Robert's old study, looking at the family photos on the wall. Daniel graduating high school, the two of us on a hiking trip in Vermont. Robert holding newborn Daniel with a look of wonder on his face. "Am I doing the right thing?" I whispered to Robert's image. "Would you make the same choice?" There was no answer, of course. But in my heart, I knew that protecting Daniel from those who would harm him was the most fundamental parental duty, even when it hurt, even when it risked our relationship, even when he couldn't understand. It was being done out of love. I had called the bank and frozen his trust fund. Now, I had to prepare for the fallout. The response was swift and explosive. My phone began ringing incessantly at 7:15 the next morning. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, but when I answered, it was Jessica's voice that came through shrill with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You have no right to freeze that money. It's Daniel's inheritance, not yours, to control." I remained calm, despite my racing heart. "Jessica, I'm not discussing trust matters with anyone except Daniel and the legal administrators. If Daniel wants to talk about this, I'm here for him." "You manipulative witch," she hissed. "You can't stand that he's happy with someone other than his precious mommy. We're getting that money one way or another." The call ended abruptly. Minutes later, Daniel called. His voice was almost unrecognizable, cold and hostile. "I can't believe you did this. After everything we've discussed about me taking control of my own life." "Daniel, there have been serious irregularities with the trust, including forged documents and unauthorized access attempts. The board had no choice but to implement security measures." "Don't lie to me," he spat. "This is about Jessica. You've hated her from the beginning. This is about protecting your future, which is my responsibility as trustee. I have documentation of everything if you want to review it rationally." "We're coming over," he said abruptly. "This ends today." Before I could respond, he had hung up. I called Andrew immediately to inform him of the situation. "Don't meet with them alone," he advised. "This could escalate. I'll come over and bring the documentation we've compiled." An hour later, my doorbell rang. Daniel stood on my porch, his face set in harsh lines I barely recognized. Jessica stood beside him, impeccably dressed and wearing large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. Andrew arrived moments later, carrying a portfolio of documents. I introduced him as my attorney, which drew a scornful laugh from Jessica. You brought a lawyer to talk to your own son. Unbelievable. I brought documentation, Andrew corrected smoothly. As Wilma's attorney, I advised her to have everything in writing, given the serious nature of the situation. We moved to the living room, the tension palpable. Daniel refused to sit standing rigidly by the fireplace, where family photos used to be displayed. I noticed with a pang that he'd removed them from his apartment when Jessica moved in. The trust is mine, Daniel began without preamble. Dad left it for me, not for you to control for the rest of my life. That's correct, I said gently. It is your trust, with specific conditions your father and I both agreed upon to ensure your long-term security. I'm getting married. I'm buying a home. Those are the conditions. Andrew interjected his tone, professionally neutral. There appear to be irregularities in the recent trust access attempts, including documents submitted with a forged signature. Jessica removed her sunglasses, her eyes flashing. Are you accusing me of something? No one is named in the documentation, Andrew replied. But we have evidence of multiple unauthorized attempts to access the trust without proper authorization. This is ridiculous, Daniel exclaimed. Mom, you're going to destroy our relationship over money. Is that what matters to you? The injustice of his accusation stung. This isn't about money. It's about protecting you. Daniel, you've changed since Jessica came into your life. The spending the debt, the sudden rush to marriage, cutting off contact with me and your friends. Because I'm finally living my own life. Are you? I asked quietly. Or are you living the life Jessica is orchestrating? Jessica stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger at me. You can't stand that he loves me, that he's chosen me over you. You're a controlling, jealous old woman who can't let go. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. Andrew went to answer it, returning with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, distinguished, with graying temples and sad eyes. I'm sorry to intrude, he said. I'm Patrick Reynolds. I believe you reached out to me, Mrs. Marshall. Jessica's face drained of color. What is he doing here? Patrick looked directly at Jessica. Hello, Jessica. Or should I say, Jessica Winters. It's been a while. Daniel looked confused. Who is this? What's going on? Patrick was engaged to Jessica 3 years ago, I explained gently, before she changed her name. Patrick nodded, his expression grim. We were engaged for 4 months. During that time, she managed to access my family's foundation funds, claiming we needed it for wedding expenses and a home purchase. Nearly $700,000 disappeared before I discovered what was happening. He's lying, Jessica snapped. I've never seen this man before. Patrick calmly opened his briefcase and removed several photographs, clearly showing him and Jessica together at various events. He also produced bank statements, police reports, and a settlement agreement. We didn't press charges because my family wanted to avoid publicity. She signed a non-disclosure agreement and repaid part of the money in exchange for us not pursuing criminal charges. Daniel stared at the evidence, his expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the first hints of doubt. Daniel, honey, Jessica said, her voice suddenly soft and vulnerable. Don't listen to them. They're trying to come between us. They're jealous of what we have. There's more, Andrew said, opening his portfolio. We've documented a pattern of similar behavior with at least 2 other men. Thomas Griffith provided a sworn statement. He handed Daniel several pages of documents. Jessica's demeanor changed instantly. This is slander. I'll sue all of you. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Daniel, we're leaving. Now. Daniel didn't move. He was reading the statement from Thomas Griffith, his hands shaking slightly. Daniel, Jessica's voice cracked like a whip. When he still didn't respond, her mask slipped completely. Fine, stay with your mommy, but don't expect me to wait around while you choose your family over me. It's them or me. Decide now. Daniel finally looked up from the documents, his face ashen. I need some time to think. Jessica laughed bitterly. To think? The trust is frozen. Our house purchase is falling through. Our wedding venue needs the deposit by Friday. There's no time to think. Maybe we should slow down, Daniel said quietly. If what's in these documents is true, so you believe them over me, after everything I've done for you. Jessica's voice had risen to a near shriek. I made you relevant. I gave you style, ambition. You were nothing before me, living in that pathetic apartment, calling your mommy every day like a child. The venom in her words seemed to shock even her. She collected herself, straightening her shoulders. I'll be at the apartment. You have until tomorrow to fix this trust situation and apologize, or I'm gone. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room fell silent. Patrick quietly excused himself after giving Daniel his contact information. Andrew packed up the documents, leaving a complete set on the coffee table. I'll give you two some privacy, he said. Daniel, I'm available if you have any legal questions about the trust or the documentation. When we were alone, Daniel sank onto the couch, looking utterly lost. Is it all true? He asked, his voice small. I believe it is, I said, gently, sitting beside him, but not touching him. I wouldn't have taken such drastic action if I wasn't convinced you were in danger financially and emotionally. Daniel stared at his hands. I need to process this. I need to be alone. I nodded, respecting his request. Take whatever time you need. I'm here when you're ready to talk. He left without another word, taking the file of evidence with him. As I watched him walk to his car, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt no triumph, only profound sadness. I had protected my son's financial future, but at what cost to his heart? The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. No calls, no texts, complete silence from Daniel. I resisted the urge to reach out, knowing he needed space to come to terms with Jessica's betrayal and his own vulnerability. I didn't know if he would ever forgive me for the intervention, but I would make the same choice again to protect him, even if it cost me our relationship. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. Can we meet Cafe Lucia at 2 Just Us? 4 simple sentences that filled me with both hope and apprehension. Cafe Lucia was where I used to take Daniel for hot chocolate when he was in elementary school. It was our special place after dentist appointments or school concerts, a tradition that had fallen away as he grew older. The fact that he had chosen this location felt significant. I arrived early, selecting a quiet table in the corner. The cafe had changed over the years, modernized with industrial lighting and artisanal coffee offerings, but the warm atmosphere remained the same. I ordered a simple black coffee and weighted my stomach in knots. Daniel arrived precisely at 2, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he had lost weight, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. He spotted me immediately, but hesitated at the entrance, as if gathering courage. I resisted the urge to go to him, giving him the space to approach on his terms. Hi, Mom, he said, simply, sliding into the chair across from me. Hi, sweetheart, I replied, fighting the tremor in my voice. I got you a mocha. Still your favorite? He nodded, wrapping his hands around the mug like he used to as a boy, seeking its warmth. We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the cafe filling the space between us. "She's gone," he finally said, staring into his coffee. "Left 3 days after everything came out. Took some of my things, electronics watches." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Turns out the engagement ring was purchased with my credit card. I didn't even know she had the information." My heart ached for him, but I held back the flood of maternal comfort I wanted to offer. This wasn't the moment for "I told you so," or even excessive sympathy. Daniel needed dignity in his pain. "I'm sorry," I said simply. "That must be very difficult." He looked up, surprise flickering across his features, perhaps at my restraint. "I was so stupid, Mom. So completely blind." His voice cracked slightly. When I confronted her with the evidence, she didn't even really deny it. She just got angry that she'd been caught. Said I was useless now that the trust was frozen. That I wasn't worth the investment anymore. The cruelty of those words made me wince. "That reflects on her character, not your worth, Daniel." He shook his head. "But she was right about one thing. I was weak, easily manipulated. I let her isolate me from you, from my friends. I let her push me into debt. I believed her when she said you were controlling me, when all you've ever done is try to protect me." Tears welled in my eyes. "You weren't weak, Daniel. You were trusting. You saw the good in someone who wasn't worthy of that trust. That's not weakness, that's being human." "I said terrible things to you," he whispered. "They weren't your words," I replied. "I knew that even then. How can you forgive me so easily?" I reached across the tea, offering my hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. "Because I'm your mother. Because I love you unconditionally. Because I know who you really are. And it isn't the person who sent those texts or said those things." Daniel's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down his face as he gripped my hand. "I'm so ashamed. The debt, the trust, the way I treated you. I don't know how to fix any of it. We'll fix it together," I assured him. "One step at a time. The trust is fine. It was never in real danger thanks to the safeguards. As for the debt, we'll work with financial advisors to create a repayment plan. I don't deserve your help." "It's not about deserving, Daniel. It's about family. Real family. Not the conditional kind Jessica offered." Over the next hour, Daniel opened up about the whirlwind months with Jessica. How she had systematically isolated him, criticized his relationship with me, made him feel simultaneously special and inadequate. How she had encouraged spending beyond his means, always with the promise that the trust fund would cover everything once they were married. How she had rehearsed what he should say to me, even writing scripts for difficult conversations. "It's like I was under a spell," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I couldn't see what was happening, even when it was right in front of me." "That's how emotional manipulation works," I explained gently. "It's not about intelligence or strength. The most intelligent, capable people can be vulnerable when someone targets their emotional needs." We developed a plan together. Daniel would meet with a financial advisor to understand the full extent of his debt and create a structured repayment plan. He would attend counseling to process the emotional trauma of Jessica's manipulation. The trust would remain intact, with adjusted terms we both agreed upon: more transparency, financial education requirements, and a gradual release of funds for legitimate needs. Most importantly, we would rebuild our relationship with clearer boundaries and mutual respect. I acknowledged that I had perhaps been too involved in some aspects of Daniel's life, making it easier for Jessica to paint me as controlling. He recognized that he had taken my support for granted, making him vulnerable to someone who offered validation at a cost. In the months that followed, Daniel worked diligently to regain his financial and emotional independence. He moved to a smaller apartment, sold the luxury car Jessica had pressured him to lease, and committed to living within his means. He joined a support group for victims of relationship fraud, where he found understanding and solidarity with others who had similar experiences. I, too, sought support, joining a group for parents of adult children. There, I learned the delicate art of supporting without controlling, of loving without smothering. I recognized that my fear of Daniel making mistakes had sometimes led me to overstep, and I worked on trusting his judgment even when I disagreed with his choices. The trust remained frozen for the initial 90 days, then was restructured with terms we both contributed to. Daniel would have graduated access starting at age 28, with full control at 30, as originally planned, but with added provisions for educational advancement, career development, and eventually a true starter home, not the mansion Jessica had envisioned. A year after that terrible text message that had started this ordeal, Daniel invited me to dinner at his new apartment. It was modest, but tastefully furnished, reflecting his personal style rather than Jessica's expensive tastes. He had been promoted at work based on a successful campaign he had developed himself, not through anyone else's influence. Most surprising was the presence of a dinner guest, Kate, a children's librarian he had met while volunteering for a literacy program. She was warm, genuine, and clearly smitten with my son, for who he was, not what he owned. When she excused herself to take a phone call from her elderly father, whom she called every evening without fail, Daniel looked at me with clear eyes. "I get it now, Mom. What real love looks like. It's not about what you can get from someone. It's about growing together, supporting each other's best selves." I smiled, my heart full. "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become." "I couldn't have gotten here without you," he admitted. "Not just the trust fund protection, though that quite literally saved my financial future, but the way you never gave up on me, even when I pushed you away. That's the kind of parent I want to be someday." As I watched my son, confidently, hosting dinner in his new home, happily building a life based on authentic connections and hard-earned wisdom, I understood the most profound truth of parenting. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is setting a boundary, even when it breaks your heart to do so. Sometimes, the hardest call a parent can make, the call to the bank, the call to reality, the call to accountability, is the one that ultimately saves your child. If you have ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, even when they couldn't understand it, please share your story in the comments. It takes courage to set boundaries with those we love the most. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of family relationships and personal growth. And remember that sometimes the hardest choices come from the deepest love. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. May you find the strength to make the difficult choices that protect those you love, even when it feels impossible.